The throne chamber of the alien monarchy was carved from living stone, polished until its dark surface reflected the torchlight like rippling water. At its center sat the queen, her massive frame draped in ceremonial armor, her crown a lattice of metal and bone that testified to countless victories. Her very presence radiated command. To the guards stationed along the walls, she was not merely ruler but embodiment of survival itself, the one who had kept her people unbroken through wars, famine, and enemies that pressed them from the stars. Yet even the fiercest ruler had her softer treasures, her daughters, small and graceful, who were regarded as the heart of her lineage. The daughters rarely left her side. They were revered by the court as future bearers of strength and continuity, sheltered behind layers of protocol and caution. Their voices were seldom heard in public, their appearances choreographed to inspire awe. To the queen, they were at once symbols of her might and reminders of her vulnerability, though she never confessed as much. She loved them fiercely, but that love was tangled with fear of betrayal, of weakness, of losing what was irreplaceable. Into this world had come a human. His name was Daniel, though here it was rarely spoken without disdain. He was an envoy by circumstance rather than choice, sent by his government as a gesture of cooperation after an uneasy truce between humanity and the Queen's people. He was neither warrior nor diplomat in the eyes of the court, merely a fragile representative of a species regarded as weak, impulsive, and undeserving of respect. Even his uniform, simple by comparison to the regalia of alien officers, seemed an insult to their grandeur. Daniel endured their scorn quietly. He had learned that his words carried little weight in councils dominated by warriors who measured honor in scars and bloodlines. What he possessed instead was patience, a trait mistaken for timidity. He was given a place in the palace not as counselor but as observer, a token of peace, watched with suspicion lest he pry too deeply into affairs not meant for human eyes. The queen tolerated his presence for reasons of politics alone. Yet she made her contempt plain whenever their paths crossed. She would remind him, sometimes with sharp words, sometimes with silence, that he did not belong. Still, her daughters had noticed him. In the rare moments when the guards looked elsewhere, their eyes would linger on him with curiosity rather than disdain. He did not thunder with arrogance as others did, nor did he treat them as untouchable relics. His gaze, though cautious, held warmth. To children who lived in the shadow of reverence, it was a novelty. The court whispered of this curiosity, some with amusement, others with suspicion. The queen dismissed it as childish fascination, unworthy of her attention. She warned her daughters sternly to keep their distance. But children, regardless of lineage, often listened poorly to commands born of fear. For weeks, this undercurrent continued. Daniel, careful not to overstep, would occasionally offer a gentle nod when their eyes met, or smile when he thought no one was watching. He had no intention of challenging the queen's authority. Yet even such small gestures had weight in a palace where every interaction was steeped in formality. The daughters remembered. It was on a night marked by storm that the rhythm of the palace broke. The winds outside howled against the stone towers, and the guards took extra care to secure the queen's chambers. By custom, her daughters were escorted to their sleeping quarters, guarded by elite sentinels, watched over by attendants who never strayed from duty. The queen herself conducted the inspection, ensuring every measure of security was in place before she retired. Only then did the chamber fall into silence, the torchlight flickering across its black walls. Hours later, the silence fractured. A cry rang through the halls, an attendant's voice, sharp with alarm. Doors slammed open, guards thundered down the passageways, and the queen herself emerged, her fury swift and unrestrained. The daughter's chamber was empty. The attendants, pale with terror, stammered that they had left only briefly, and when they returned the beds were vacant, the windows sealed, no trace of entry or escape. Panic ignited the court. The queen's roar echoed through the halls, a sound that rattled even the sturdiest guards. She demanded answers, demanded search parties, demanded the impossible, that her children be returned instantly or those responsible pay in blood. The attendants fell to their knees, begging forgiveness. The guards scattered, searching every corridor, every hidden stair, every shadow of the palace. Daniel was roused from uneasy sleep by the commotion. 2 guards burst into his chamber, seizing him roughly before he could speak. He was dragged through the halls, past flickering torches and the thunder of armored boots, until he was thrown to the stone floor before the queen herself. Her eyes burned with suspicion as she towered over him. "You," she hissed, her voice trembling not with weakness but with a strain of fury and fear intermingled. "Where are they?" Daniel struggled to his knees, bewildered. "Where are who?" "The heirs," she spat. "My daughters. Gone from their chambers under watch, and you, outsider, you think I do not see your hand in this." The accusation hung heavy, too sharp to refute with simple words. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "I swear to you, I had nothing to do with this. I've been asleep." The queen's hand flexed against the hilt of her ceremonial blade. The guards shifted, eager for the command to strike. Yet before she could speak it, a scout stumbled into the chamber, panting from the run. His voice cracked as he reported, They've been found." A pause, heavy as stone. "Where?" the queen demanded. The scout swallowed hard. "In the humans' quarters." The chamber fell into stunned silence. Daniel froze, his thoughts spinning faster than he could control. The queen's eyes narrowed to slits, her suspicion hardening into certainty. "Bring them," she commanded. Moments later, the guards returned. And there, in their arms, were the daughters, not frightened, not harmed, but drowsy with the warmth of sleep. Their small hands still clutched at Daniel's shirt, their faces nestled against his chest as if they had chosen him willingly as their refuge. The chamber gasped as one. The queen stared, her fury arrested by shock, her daughter's trust visible to all. The silence was more dangerous than shouting. Daniel did not move. The daughters stirred faintly, sighing in their slumber, as if no safer place existed than against the heart of the human their mother despised. And in that moment, the conflict that would shake both species had begun. The weight of the moment pressed against every soul in the chamber, though none bore it heavier than the queen herself. Her daughters, her pride, her blood, the core of her unshakable rule, rested with unshakable trust against the human she had never considered more than a fragile interloper. The contradiction was unbearable, almost insulting, yet undeniable. No stage performance, no trick of diplomacy, could counterfeit the unguarded way children slept, their small limbs entwined with Daniel's as though he were their natural guardian. Her jaw tightened, but she gave no order. The guards waited for command, hands poised on their weapons, glancing between their queen and the human, uncertain whether to strike or bow. Daniel himself was frozen in stillness, not from fear of blades, though that was real enough, but from the understanding that any wrong motion might shatter the fragile balance hanging in the air. At last, the queen spoke, her voice low but cutting like steel. "Explain." Daniel swallowed hard, forcing his voice steady. "I don't know how they came to me. I was asleep. When the gods woke me, they were already there." He dared to glance down at the daughters, their faces serene against his chest. "I never lured them. They came of their own will." The words were dangerous. They implied choice, a notion the queen loathed when applied to her children. Still, the evidence lay plain before all eyes. Her daughters stirred faintly at his voice, one tightening her grip on his shirt as if refusing to be parted. A murmur rippled through the court. Some whispered of sorcery, others of manipulation, still others of prophecy. The queen silenced them with a glare that could have scorched stone. "Take them," she commanded finally, gesturing to her guards. But when the armored hands reached forward, the daughters whimpered, clinging harder to Daniel, their small bodies trembling at the thought of separation. The sound was piercing, primal, something no calculation of courtly decorum could mute. The guards hesitated. The queen's fury fled, not at her daughters, but at the shame of hesitation in her presence. Yet beneath her rage lurked something she had not felt in decades, uncertainty. Daniel, sensing the perilous crack in her composure, spoke again, carefully, softly, as though addressing not a monarch but a mother. "They are afraid. If you tear them away now, it will only deepen that fear." The queen's glare snapped to him, a force that would have driven a lesser man to silence. Yet he did not look away. For once, he held a gaze not as a subject to a ruler, but as one parentless man addressing a parent consumed by fear. "Let me set them down gently," he added, "so they know they are safe." The chamber was silent enough to hear the rain battering the windows. The queen said nothing, but her stillness was not denial. Daniel moved slowly, lowering himself until he laid the children upon the cushioned floor, easing their fingers from his shirt with painstaking care. They whimpered but did not wail, their trust in him lingering even as the gods finally gathered them into their arms. When the daughters were carried away, the chamber felt emptier than before, though the queen's presence still loomed immense. Her eyes narrowed, burning with conflicting fires, suspicion, wrath, and something dangerously close to doubt. "You will be watched more closely than the air I breathe," she declared, her voice echoing with authority. "If I find even a whisper of deceit, your bones will line these walls." Daniel bowed his head, not out of subservience, but because defiance here would serve nothing. "I understand," he said. The queen departed with a sweep of her cloak, her daughters clutched in her arms, as though she could shield them from the memory of their choice. The court dissolved into whispers as Daniel was hauled back to his quarters, the gods' grips tighter than before, their suspicion doubled. Yet that night, alone in his chamber, Daniel could not sleep. The warmth of the daughters' small bodies lingered against his chest, a memory sharper than any blade. He had not sought their trust, yet they had given it freely. In doing so, they had ignited a fire that could consume him, or perhaps change everything. In the days that followed, the palace seethed with tension. The queen ordered doubled security around her daughters. Guards patrolled the corridors without rest, attendants were interrogated, and even whispers of negligence were punished harshly. Yet the children, despite every barrier, continued to seek Daniel. He would wake to find them peering curiously into his chamber, slipping past guards with the uncanny ease of youth. Their presence was no accident, it was insistence. At first, Daniel tried to send them back, knowing each encounter was another noose tightening around his neck. But each time, their eyes, wide, luminous, unafraid, dismantled his resolve. They did not want another lecture, another ceremony, another night of formality. They wanted him, the human who treated them as children, not as emblems of power. He told them stories of earth, of oceans vast as the sky, of creatures small and harmless yet beautiful. He answered their questions with patience when others silenced them with commands. And he laughed with them, softly, a sound alien to the marble-cold halls. Word reached the queen, as it always did. Her wrath grew with each report. Yet beneath the fire, a question gnawed at her. Why him? Why her daughters, heirs of her unyielding bloodline, gravitated toward a man whose species was scorned as frail? She told herself it was trickery, that humans had hidden talents for deceit. But when she confronted her daughters, demanding explanation, they only pressed closer together and whispered the same words again and again. "He makes us feel safe." The queen could not bear those words. To her, safety was forged through strength, through vigilance, through fear that kept enemies at bay. Safety was a fortress, not a fragile man's arms. Yet she could not erase the sight of her daughters asleep against him, their breaths steady, their dreams untroubled. Her fury turned inward, feeding suspicion, breeding plans. If this human threatened her children's loyalty, she would uncover his scheme and crush it. And if he was no threat at all, then she would face a truth far more dangerous, that her daughters had chosen freely, and chosen him. Daniel felt the storm gathering. He could sense it in the glances of the guards, in the clipped tones of the attendants, in the growing silence that followed him wherever he walked. He was no longer merely a tolerated envoy. He had become a focal point of tension, a living contradiction in the queen's court. And though he did not seek conflict, he knew the storm would soon break. The queen's throne room, vast as a cathedral and lined with obsidian pillars carved in the likeness of her ancestors, became the crucible where suspicion hardened into decision. She sat upon her towering seat, every inch a monarch, though the silence between her words pressed heavier than any decree. Before her stood Daniel, hands bound though his eyes betrayed neither fear nor defiance, only an exhaustion that came from battles fought without weapons. Around them, courtiers and generals lined the chamber, eager to witness the spectacle of the human's undoing. Rumors had reached a crescendo. Whispers spoke of sorcery, of hidden human technology, of treachery woven into lullabies. The children's continued pull toward Daniel was no longer dismissed as coincidence. To the queen's mind, it was contamination, something invasive, gnawing at the order she had constructed around her daughters. "You stand accused," the queen's voice rang out, sharp enough to draw blood, "of ensnaring the loyalty of my heirs. Tell me, human, by what artifice have you done this?" Daniel lifted his gaze to her. He was tired, yes, but not broken. No artifice. No scheme. They come because they wish to. Nothing more. The words were both simple and explosive. Gasps scattered through the court, for they carried with them the intolerable suggestion that the daughters of the fiercest queen in the galaxy were not bound by command but by choice. The queen's claws tapped against the arm of her throne, each strike like a drumbeat of anger. "You insult me with such answers. You seek to undermine my rule by corrupting what is most sacred." Daniel shook his head. "I undermine nothing. They are children, not soldiers. They come to me because I listen, because I treat them as themselves, not as symbols of your power. You see betrayal, but all they want is warmth." His words cut deeper than any blade. For a heartbeat, silence blanketed the room. Then came the murmurs, swelling into argument. One general demanded the human's execution. A priestess claimed this was an omen from the stars. An advisor urged restraint, warning that rashness might reveal weakness. The queen silenced them all with a raised hand. Her gaze pinned Daniel with the weight of planets. "If it is as you say, then prove it. You will face the trial of truth. Should you survive, I will believe your words. If you fail, your death will be slow and instructive." Daniel did not know the nature of this trial, but the conviction in her voice left no doubt it was cruel, perhaps impossible. Still, he inclined his head. "Then I will face it." The chamber erupted. Some shouted that the queen showed mercy unbefitting her reputation. Others hissed that the human was a danger too great to risk sparing. Yet the queen had spoken, and her word was law. Guards dragged Daniel away, his steps steady despite the weight of what awaited him. In the quiet after, the queen dismissed her court and retreated to her private sanctum. Alone, she allowed her mask to slip. Anger remained, yes, but it twined now with something unfamiliar, fear not of Daniel, but of her daughter's unshakable insistence. When she had pried them from his arms, their eyes had not wept with hatred or confusion, but with sorrow, as though she had stolen from them a source of light she could not provide. She pressed her hands against the cold stone of her chamber, her thoughts unspooling in silence. For years she had ruled through strength, through dread, through the certainty that she alone was shield and sword for her people. Yet here was a fragile man, one whose body could be broken in a heartbeat, and still her daughters found in him a fortress stronger than all her armies. It was intolerable. It was impossible. And yet, it was true. Elsewhere in the palace, Daniel sat chained in darkness. The cell was cold, the walls damp with the weight of years, but his thoughts burned brighter than the gloom. He did not know what trial awaited him, but he knew it was not designed for him to win. Still, the memory of small hands clutching his shirt, of trust given without demand, steadied him. If he must endure, he would. Not for his sake, but for theirs. Night fell. The palace hushed, though vigilance never waned. In the queen's chambers, the daughters stirred. They had been forbidden from leaving, watched by attendants day and night, but such barriers meant little to children determined beyond reason. Like whispers, they slipped past guards, small feet padding across stone, drawn again to the man their mother named Danger. This time, they did not find him waiting with open arms. They found emptiness, the cell barred, the human within chained. Their voices trembled with confusion as they called for him. Daniel lifted his head, offering them the faintest smile through the bars. "Go back," he whispered urgently. "If they find you here, it will only worsen things." But children know little of politics, and less of fear. They reached through the bars, their small fingers brushing his, as if to assure him he was not forgotten. Their touch was fleeting, interrupted by the sharp cry of guards discovering their absence. The daughters were whisked away once more, their protests echoing down the corridor. Daniel closed his eyes, the echo of their voices a balm and a curse both. He had become a fulcrum, a fragile balance upon which the fate of the queen's family, and perhaps her rule, now rested. And in the queen's heart, fury and doubt warred without resolution. The trial of truth loomed, not only for Daniel, but for herself. For if the human survived, Then every truth she had built her reign upon might begin to fracture. The storm was gathering, and none could yet see where its lightning would strike. Dawn bled across the alien sky, its twin suns rising like molten eyes, casting the capital's spires in streaks of crimson and gold. The palace square was alive with anticipation, a seething ocean of citizens drawn to witness the trial of truth. Banners depicting the queen's crest fluttered against the hot wind, while soldiers stood like living statues at the perimeter, spears gleaming in the light. The air vibrated with expectation, with the hunger of a people who had come to see judgment rendered upon the foreigner who had bewitched their princesses. Daniel was led into the square, wrists still bound, though his shoulders were straight and his stride betrayed no faltering. Chains clinked against the stone as he was positioned at the heart of the arena, a circular expanse carved from black rock and veined with glowing fissures. The ground itself seemed to breathe, exhaling heat as though the planet's core had risen close to the surface. Above him, the queen appeared on a raised dais, armored in obsidian plates that shimmered like liquid night, her presence dwarfing all others. The crowd roared her name, an affirmation of loyalty, of fear, of reverence. "The trial of truth begins," she declared, her voice magnified by ancient amplifiers embedded in the stone. "Here, in the crucible of fire, deception burns away. If this human speaks truth, he will endure. If he lies, he will perish, and his ashes will scatter as warning to all who dare corrupt what is mine." From the fissures, molten light surged, shaping itself into forms at once natural and monstrous. Guardians of flame and stone, conjured by the queen's order, took form around Daniel, creatures with jaws of magma, claws of obsidian, and eyes like furnaces. They circled him, their heat pressing against his skin, daring him to falter. Daniel's breath caught in his throat, but he did not plead. He looked upward, past the queen's mask of iron resolve, toward the balcony where he knew her daughters were hidden from sight. He imagined their eyes pressed to the gaps, searching for him, waiting. That thought steadied him. He would not give them the image of Faye. The first guardian lunged, molten jaws snapping with a crack that split the air. Daniel threw himself aside, rolling across the searing stone, the heat scalding through his torn clothes. Pain lanced his skin, but he staggered back to his feet. Another creature surged forward, claws raking, and he ducked low, his chains swinging to deflect the strike. The metal hissed as sparks showered. The crowd howled approval, the spectacle feeding their thirst for certainty. Yet beneath their jeers ran an undercurrent of unease, for the human did not crumble. He moved with desperation, yes, but also with resolve, as though every breath was bound to a vow unspoken. The queen watched, her gaze sharp, her claws flexing against the armrests of her throne. She had crafted the trial to prove his falsehood, to strip away whatever strange influence he wielded. Yet as he endured, as he rose again and again despite the fire and fury arrayed against him, a whisper of doubt crept into a certainty. When the third guardian struck, Daniel did not evade. Instead, he raised his bound arms, catching its clawed swipe with his chains, wrapping the hot metal tight around its limb. His palms burned, skin blistering, but he held on, teeth gritted against the pain. With a shout, he pulled, dragging the molten beast off balance, sending it crashing into another. The impact exploded in a shower of sparks, and for a moment the arena filled with blinding light. The crowd gasped. Some cried out in admiration, others in horror. Yet all saw the same thing, a man, fragile in form, refusing to break. From the balcony, the daughters pressed closer, their small fists clenched. Though attendants tried to restrain them, their voices rose, shrill and fierce, carrying over the tumult. "Mother, let him go. He is not your enemy." The queen's head snapped toward the sound. Her composure fractured for a heartbeat as her daughter's cries echoed through the square. All eyes turned from the trial to the royal balcony, whispers cascading through the masses like wildfire. If the heirs themselves begged for the human's life, what did that mean? Daniel swayed where he stood, chest heaving, burns mottling his skin, but his eyes sought the balcony. When he glimpsed their small silhouettes framed against the light, he smiled despite the agony. That smile, unguarded and real, cut deeper into the queen than all his words had before. The guardians froze, their forms flickering as if awaiting command. The queen could order them to finish it, to reduce him to ash before her daughter's very eyes. Yet to do so would silence more than his life. It would silence the questions now lodged in every witness's mind. Her claws dug grooves into the throne as she wrestled with herself. The truth of power was simple. Strength commanded, weakness obeyed. And yet here was a man who commanded not through terror, but through the willing love of her daughters, through resilience no flame could consume. Was that not strength as well? The silence stretched, taut as a blade's edge. Daniel, scorched and trembling, waited without bowing, without begging. The crowd leaned forward, their judgment coiled in the queen's next words. Finally, she rose. Her voice thundered across the square, though beneath its steel ran something else. Hesitation, perhaps even recognition. The trial is ended. Gasps rippled outward, colliding with cries of disbelief and awe. The guardians dissolved back into flame, sinking into the fissures from which they had come. Daniel collapsed to one knee, not in surrender, but in exhaustion. The queen descended from her dais, each step echoing like a heartbeat across the arena. She stood before him, towering, her shadow engulfing him entirely. For a moment, neither spoke. The crowd held its breath, caught in the balance between mercy and wrath. "You endure," she said at last, her tone low, weighted. "Whether by truth or madness, you endure. That alone demands acknowledgment." Her words did not absolve him, nor did they condemn. They were something in between, a door left half open, an admission that certainty was no longer his alone. The crowd erupted into debate, voices clashing like storm winds. Some hailed it as a sign of destiny, others as dangerous weakness. Yet all knew the world had shifted. The human had survived the trial of truth, and the queen's daughters had cried out for him before all. Daniel raised his head, meeting her gaze with eyes that held no malice, only the stubborn quiet of one who refused to yield. The queen studied him, her own mask beginning to crack. And as the suns climbed higher, blazing down upon them both, a new war began, not of fire or steel, but of hearts, of loyalties, of truths too fragile to cage. The palace corridors were hushed, though tension lingered in every polished surface, every shadow cast by the torchlight. Daniel's steps echoed faintly as he was escorted through the labyrinth of stone and metal, his chains now removed but the marks still roar against his wrists. Two guards flanked him, wary yet silent, their eyes betraying uncertainty. A man who had survived the trial of truth was no ordinary prisoner, and though their orders bound them, doubt flickered in their glances. At last, the doors to the inner chamber opened. The space was vast yet intimate, designed not for spectacle but for confrontation. Pillars rose like petrified trees, supporting a ceiling painted with constellations that shimmered faintly as though alive. At the far end, upon a dais, stood the queen, not armored as before, but cloaked in deep crimson fabric that pooled at her feet like spilled blood. Without the gleam of obsidian plates, she seemed no less imposing. If anything, the absence of war gear laid bare the sheer gravity of her presence. Her daughters were there too, huddled together near the throne, their eyes luminous in the dim light. They had been forbidden to speak during the trial, but nothing could restrain their expressions now. Relief shone from their faces at the sight of Daniel alive, tempered by the fear of what their mother might decree. The guards stepped back, leaving Daniel alone at the foot of the dais. Silence reigned, broken only by the faint crackle of the torches. "You should be ash," the queen said at last, her voice quiet, stripped of the theatrics that had commanded the arena. "Yet here you stand. Explain yourself, human. What have you done to them?" Daniel met her gaze, though exhaustion weighed on him like iron. "Nothing," he said simply. "I did nothing but treat them with care. They are children, and they trusted me. That is all." The queen's eyes narrowed. Children do not vanish into the arms of a stranger. They do not defy their blood for one unproven. She stepped forward, her height and strength a living reminder of power, her claws glinting in the torchlight. "They are mine, yet they clung to you as though you were their protector. Why?" The princesses stirred then, unable to contain themselves. The eldest, her voice trembling but clear, spoke, "Because he listens. Because he does not fear us, nor command us as soldiers. With him, we are safe." The queen turned sharply, her expression unreadable. "Safe? Am I not your shield, your fortress, your very world? You are our queen, the youngest whispered, "but he is different." Daniel felt the weight of their words press upon him, heavier than any chain. They spoke truth, but truth here was as dangerous as fire. The queen's gaze returned to him, her face carved from stone. "Do you claim dominion over what is mine?" "No," Daniel replied, his voice steady despite the storm gathering around them. "I claim nothing. But they came to me, and I did not turn them away. If that is my crime, then judge me for it." Her eyes searched his face, as if looking for deception, for weakness, for the telltale flicker of ambition that had toppled countless others. Yet she found none. His defiance was not born of arrogance, but of conviction, unyielding, quiet, infuriating. The chamber seemed to contract, the silence stretching taut. The daughters pressed closer together, their fear rising with every heartbeat. For the first time in years, perhaps in her reign, the queen hesitated. To destroy him would be simple, an act of power unquestioned. But to do so under the eyes of her heirs, who had so publicly chosen him, would fracture something she could not mend. At length, she spoke, her tone sharpened like a blade. "You stand at the edge of a knife, human. My people call for your blood, and only I decide whether you walk free or fall beneath fire. But know this, if you remain, you will be bound to me. Every step you take, every breath you draw, will be under my scrutiny. One misstep, and you will not endure again." Daniel inclined his head, neither yielding nor boasting. "Then let me remain. Not for myself, but for them." The daughter's eyes shone with relief, though fear still lingered. The queen's own expression remained a fortress, but within her gaze was something Daniel had not seen before, conflict, fragile and dangerous. She turned, ascending the dais once more, her cloak sweeping across the stone. "So be it," she declared, though her words lacked the finality of absolute conviction. "You will stay within these walls. You will learn what it means to live under my command. And should you falter, I will see you undone." The guard stepped forward, but not to seize him, rather, to escort him deeper into the palace, no longer a prisoner, yet not free. The daughters followed with their eyes, their relief tempered by the knowledge of the peril he now faced. As the chamber doors closed behind him, the queen remained motionless upon her dais, her claws tapping softly against the armrest. The arena had not broken him. The trial had not exposed him. Instead, he had survived both, and in doing so, he had planted seeds of doubt, of possibility, in places she had sworn would remain untouched. She stared into the shadows that clung to the corners of the chamber, and for the first time in many cycles, the Queen of 1,000 Victories wondered if the greatest threat to her reign was not an enemy's army, but a human's unshakable presence in the hearts of her daughters. The palace air was different in the days that followed. Whispers traveled faster than footsteps, curling through every hall and chamber. Servants carried trays while stealing glances at the human who now walked without chains. Guards shifted uneasily, their loyalty tested each time the princesses darted past them to greet him with unguarded smiles. What had once been a fortress of certainty had become a hive of suspicion, curiosity, and unspoken tension. Daniel noticed every stare, every murmured phrase cut short when he passed. He did not belong here, and yet he could not leave. His promise to the children bound him, as surely as any iron. Each evening he sat with them in their private chambers, listening to their fears, their laughter, their hopes whispered like secrets. In those moments, the enormity of a queen's burden became clearer to him. How a mother could raise heirs who adored her power yet longed for her gentleness, something she seemed unable to give. But outside those quiet hours, the court's hostility grew sharper. Counselors convened in tight knots, their arguments hushed but fierce. "He is an infection," one voice muttered as Daniel passed near an archway. "The daughters must be protected from his influence." Another countered with unease. "If the queen spared him, who are we to contradict her? Perhaps she tests us." Fear of the queen's wrath held them at bay, but only barely. The queen herself remained a mystery. She summoned Daniel only once during that time, to a hall overlooking the vast expanse of her city. From the balcony, he saw towers of obsidian rising like jagged teeth, markets teeming with life, banners snapping in the wind. Her people thrived under her iron hand, yet their prosperity carried the brittle sharpness of obedience rather than joy. "You see them," she said, not looking at him. Every breath they draw, every morsel they eat, is because of me. I do not have the luxury of weakness. Do you understand that, human? Daniel's reply was measured. I see a people who respect you, perhaps even fear you. But your daughters, they want more than respect. They want a mother who can hold them without armor. Her eyes flicked toward him, cold and dangerous, yet with a flicker of something unspoken. And you presume to teach me how to raise what is mine? I presume nothing, he answered, steady despite her intensity. I only see what they show me. You can command their loyalty forever. But their love, they've already given it away. Her silence lingered longer than her threat. For a heartbeat, it seemed she might strike him down, erase the insult with blood. Yet she turned back to the city instead, her claws tightening against the stone railing. Leave me. Daniel did, though her words clung to him like shadow. It was not long before the court forced her hand. In the grand hall, beneath banners that had witnessed countless declarations of war and peace, the counselors gathered in her presence. Their voices rose in unison, urging decisive action. The human endangers the bloodline, one elder proclaimed. His presence poisons the heir's loyalty. Another added, your restraint is seen as weakness. The people whisper already. The queen sat upon her throne, silent as a storm held in check. Her daughters stood nearby, their eyes wide, their small hands clenching together. Daniel stood too, summoned like an accused criminal, though he had committed no crime. The weight of 100 eyes pressed against him, demanding guilt, demanding removal. Finally, the queen's voice cut through the tumult. Enough. The hall fell silent. Her gaze swept across the gathered faces, lingering on none yet piercing all. You question me? You question the will of your queen. Murmurs of denial filled the air, but the unease remained. She rose from the throne, her presence a tide that crashed over the assembly. You see a human, a fragile creature who should not have endured. Yet he has survived trials no warrior among you would dare face. My daughters sought him, not you. They found solace where your counsel failed. Do you call that weakness or strength? Her words rippled through the hall, sowing confusion, doubt, fear. To side against her was treason. To accept her defense of him was unthinkable. Yet she had spoken, and her authority was absolute. Still, the strain in her posture betrayed what only Daniel seemed to notice. She was not only defending him, she was defending herself, her decision, her daughter's choice. For the first time, cracks showed in her unyielding armor. That night, Daniel found the princesses asleep in his chambers, curled against him as if the chaos of the court could not reach them there. Their breathing was soft, steady, their trust absolute. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, aware of the storm that gathered outside those walls. The queen's footsteps came hours later, slow and deliberate. She entered without announcement, her silhouette framed by the dim torchlight. For a long moment she said nothing, her gaze resting on the scene before her, her daughters tangled in the arms of the human she should have destroyed. Her voice, when it came, was low and raw. They choose you without hesitation. Do you know what that makes you in my world? Daniel met her eyes, unflinching. It makes me their protector. Nothing more. She stepped closer, shadows shifting around her like living things. It makes you my rival, she whispered. And yet, also something else I cannot name. Her claws grazed the doorframe, but she did not advance. She looked at her daughters once more, then turned away, leaving the chamber in silence. Daniel exhaled slowly, the weight of her words pressing heavier than any decree. The battle was no longer for his survival, nor even for the children's trust. It was for the fragile, dangerous space opening between him and the queen, a space where enmity and alliance blurred, where love and fear were indistinguishable. And in that space, he knew, the true conflict had only just begun.